Hey friends! In this video, I want to talk to you about the biggest mistake new executive function coaches make. This mistake is a big one because if you don't address it, students will feel disengaged during your coaching sessions, they'll pull away emotionally, and they'll probably tell their parents that they don't want to come to their next session with you, which is not a good thing. You can avoid this mistake by focusing on those small wins that build client confidence and make them want to show up at your next coaching session. Ready to dive in? So here it is, the biggest mistake new executive function coaches make, which is they try to do too much in their coaching sessions. The reason they make this mistake is because of what I call imposter syndrome. And this is the fear that they're not doing enough, and so they try to over deliver, but really just end up overwhelming the student and potentially the family as well. So a couple ways this might appear in those coaching sessions. They might try to amaze their client by teaching them all 12 or 15 executive function skills in their first coaching session. Or they might try to do more than is expected in their first coaching session or first couple of coaching sessions, hoping their clients walk away with tons of value. Or lastly, they might try to push that new student to doing more than they can possibly do in one session, hoping to ensure the parents are happy or satisfied walking away from that first coaching session. Let's break those down a bit further into the biggest mistakes new coaches make in their coaching sessions. So 1, they overload the student. This might look like trying to teach a student what metacognition is or teaching them about working memory in their first session when really the student is missing a bunch of assignments and needs to address that first. 2, the other biggest mistake they make is trying to be the be everything coach. I've seen coaches who say they are life coaches and emotional coaches and teach students about their Enneagram profile when really you need to zone in on being an executive function coach rather than the do everything coach. So many coaches come to me and they want to become an executive function coach, but they want to be so many other things. If you can just focus on helping students overcome missing assignments, learning strategies to communicate with their teachers effectively, and plan out their days, you've done so much for the student. You don't have to be the be everything coach. And lastly, one of the biggest mistakes executive function coaches make is a lack of practical focus. Because many coaches are coming in from a background in special education, they think that it's necessary for them to do in-depth evaluations of the student, when really parents aren't there for that. For example, you may think you need to do a brief or WISC or some type of deep cognitive testing just to get started with a student. But parents have probably either already addressed that through assessment or aren't there for those reasons. They're there because they want you to help their child with missing assignments, communicating with their teachers, and developing executive function skills, not doing some deep analytical evaluation. So if you're ready to let go of being the do everything coach and becoming a great executive function coach, let me walk you through the steps. The first thing you can do is focus on small wins. And when I say small, I mean tiny. And the mistake I see many coaches make here is they say, I don't want to help them with their missing assignments. That's too basic. I want to teach emotional regulation and metacognition. Those are the skills that really matter in life. While there's value in emotional regulation and working memory and metacognition, it's like trying to teach a child to read by handing them a copy of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. It's overwhelming. Instead, focus on the small micro wins that are going to give them immediate value, like teaching them how to check their portals, set up a student dashboard, send a proper email to their teachers to come up with a plan for success. These things get immediate gratification when addressed, rather than trying to focus on the big stuff that becomes overwhelming. Now, here are 3 reasons why you want to focus on small wins during your coaching sessions. 1, it increases student engagement. When students focus on small wins and feel success, they become more engaged and want to come back to your coaching sessions. 2, you're more likely to get positive parent feedback. When parents see practical wins and their kids are feeling proud about it, then they're happy with the support you're delivering. And 3, this actually aids in long-term skill development. When students identify small practical wins that they can put in place during your sessions, then they become more confident, resilient, and engaged in the education process, which leads to better executive function skills in the long run. So I've broken it down into 5 things you can do as an executive function coach to focus on those small wins and not overwhelm your clients. Let's get into it. Number 1 is build a connection. When you focus on connection before correction, you're able to help the child feel better about this process. Here's a couple things you can do to support building a strong connection with a student. In your first session, ask them things like, what's the cheat code to working effectively with you? If they start to answer, say something like, tell me more. Don't just cut them off. Another thing you can ask so you can help them author the outcomes of the session are, hey, What would you do in the session for you to feel like it was an amazing use of your time? By asking them, you're allowing them to lead the session and develop executive skills. 2, focus on those practical tasks. A lot of kids don't know how to check their school portals like Canva, Schoology, or Google Classroom. So show them how to navigate it. Show them how to identify what's missing, what's upcoming, what are their teachers sending to them, how do they respond to their teachers. This really matters and makes a big impact on their school experience. Another thing I like to do with students in our sessions is confirm they can respond to a text message. So one thing I'll do is say, hey, I'm just going to send you a text right now. I want you to respond to it to practice that skill. You'd be amazed how useful this can be in the future. In the Executive Function Coaching Academy, I often teach coaches to use what I call the trial yes. So this is where you ask them a small question to make sure they're engaged in the process. It might be something like, hey, can you share your screen so we can see what you're working on? This also helps when you're wondering if the kid is texting or working on something else if you're working online. So start with those small wins using the trial yes method to make sure they're engaged. Third, involve the parents. A big mistake I see new coaches make is that they try to keep the parents out of the process, and then you get 3 months in and the parents have spent a bunch of money and they're wondering, what have you done? So what we teach in the Executive Function Coaching Academy is to have the family team meeting process. This is where you go through a meeting with the parents and you identify what's going well, what needs to change, and who does what by when. Now, of course, you want the student at that meeting, but by identifying what's going well, you lower that affective filter. Then you go into what needs to change and everybody gives their input, and then you zone in on what is the student willing to do and who's willing to help with it. Because if you're only meeting with a student once a week, they're still going to need support on those other days. Fourth, start to measure progress in your sessions. So instead of collecting some deep baseline data about their cognitive functioning, why don't you identify how many missing assignments they have and what their grades are when they start working with you? Then you can work with the student to come up with a plan to go from 10 missing assignments to 9. Or to 8, and slowly improve. Remember, the focus of coaching is not perfection, it's progress. So if they have D's and C's, see how you can raise those grades to C's and B's. Lastly, focus on the small, tiny improvements over time. So something that I help students do when they're feeling overwhelmed between our coaching sessions is asking them, hey, what's one thing you would want to do between our coaching sessions? And if they still feel stuck, not being able to get started, I say, what can you do for 2 minutes or less on that thing? I usually ask them to send proof after they've completed it so they start to feel a sense of accountability in working with an executive function coach. Okay, so in summary, this is how you can avoid making the biggest mistake of executive function coaching, which is to overwhelm your clients when you get started. So here are 5 things you can do to take action today to improve your ability to connect with your clients. 1, start with the principle, connect before you correct. Focus on getting to know them before you ask them to do things. 2, focus on those micro wins. Teach them how to check their portals, identifying upcoming and missing assignments by plotting them into a student dashboard, rather than teaching them about the big things like emotional regulation and working memory in your first couple of sessions. 3, proactively seek feedback from parents by running family team meetings and sending a note after each of your sessions. 4, track progress effectively by zoning in on things that you can actually track, like missing assignments and grades. And 5, make a habit of focusing on those tiny wins using proofability after your sessions or something they can do in 2 minutes or less to see how they're making progress. I hope this video was helpful. If you want more free resources on how to help students with executive function skills, check out the resources in the bio so I can support you further. See you in the next video.